Well, hello there, everyone. It's Kristi, and you didn't know this hangout was coming because I didn't know this hangout was coming. There were technical issues, and so welcome to a discussion, another one, about the German election that's happening on my channel. I am joined today by somebody who knows way more about the German election, again, although I learned a lot from my last guests than I do. Ruven, who is from the podcast Nobody Listens, and also our, our resident politics junkie. Doesn't matter what country it is. Kevin will be interested in the politics. Kevin Logan, how are you doing, both of you guys?
Well, I'm doing better today than I was yesterday because yesterday I was panicking about what's going to happen today, and now I'm just resigned, honestly.
Right. Well,
And
that sounds
I'm not massively happy about the result, but I'm less bothered because it's not where I'm from.
right.
So
Well,
I can kind of look at it a bit more dispassionately.
I guess as an American, I had the result of Donald Trump, so it's really hard to bottom that.
Yeah,
Not top it, but bottom it.
this puts everything in perspective. Like,
For
Yeah,
me,
I
well,
exactly. Yeah,
don't
look.
forget about this anymore.
Well, we did the Brexit thing first, and I thought,
yeah,
oh
that's
well, it can't get worse than that. And then the only positive really of Trump getting in was it just made Brexit look like a storm in a teacup. It's
oh yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. It was one of those hold my beer moments. um,
Yeah.
of international politics. But we're going to be discussing the election. We were initially going to be doing this over on a different channel that didn't work out. So even though I'm hosting, I'm handing over hosting duties to Reuven. So for those of the people who are going to be watching on my channel who don't know about you, Reuven, can you give a little bit of your background before you start us off?
Yeah, I don't really know what to say.
Well,
I
like about your
do,
podcast and being in
yeah,
German.
I do a podcast which is on hiatus right now with a friend of mine from England, Maddie, where we discuss a piece of media and talk about politics and everything else going from there. I'm in Germany. I always lived here. This is the second time I'm voting. I'm very much left wing. And I'm the guy who's been trying to reclaim the label SJW into something positive because it describes me very well. And so this will be kind of focused on social justice at times and maybe the history of Germany at other times, whatever we want to talk about.
I
But
also just want to say I prefer the term social justice advocate rather than SJW because SJW is their term, and I think it's important that we have our own language and our own discourse. So I would
oh,
say I would recommend
I haven't
social
heard that
justice
too many
advocate.
times.
Well, no, I'm trying to make it a thing, right?
Yeah, I'm
Create
gonna
the
think about that. I'm gonna think
yeah,
about that.
have a think.
But yeah, so I went to vote today after really not feeling the best today. I was just so worried about these stats coming in, and I voted for Die Linke, but I mostly voted against the AfD, honestly, which is a "we are not Nazis but" party in Germany. And I think we should really start with them before we go into other stuff, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I was as an Englishman talking about German politics. It reminds me very much of the Faulty Towers skit of trying not to mention the war, but it's difficult not to when you've literally got Nazis that are going to be sat in the
As I
Bundestag.
said, we are going to talk about history today. It's just going to happen. We have to talk about this. And just to say this upfront, this is the first time after the Second World War that there's more than a handful of Nazis in the German parliament.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't, obviously it's too early to have gotten a full breakdown, but I imagine it's going to be much like it was in France, where you've got a lot of disaffected young people voting for them on the basis that they don't they don't have either living memory of it, of course, or close familial living relatives who were around when the Nazis were an actual thing, and so young people are so detached from that that they basically don't seem to realise quite how dangerous this could be.
Well, if I might repeat analysis I watched that makes me look smart, but actually the credit goes to Deutsche Welle Live, the news stream. The way that the shifts in the voting are mapping out looks a lot like, even though the AFD took a little bit from sort of a wide range of parties, it pulled more from the SDP, which was a traditionally Labour party. And that, to me, Kevin, mirrors very much what happened with UKIP being pulled from Labour in 2010. You know, you would think that would be a lot of conservative voters going over for UKIP maybe, but really it was the sort of populist, the right-leaning populist vote that came from the Labour movement that was motivated primarily by immigration issues. So we're seeing that sort of the same right-wing populism impact on elections in France, in the United States, in Greece, obviously, and other places in the UK, and I would say now in Germany as well.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know the AFD platform entirely well, but I get the impression that they're not as libertarian in their economic stance as UKIP were, so it would make slightly more sense for those disaffected centre-left voters to move to an extreme right party, because economically it's not that far removed from what they wanted anyway.
The thing they mostly say about the economy is that Germany should just go back to the mark, which is the currency we had before the euro, and
Right.
that is something that means so little that it can appeal to everyone who actually still believes that there wasn't a reason that Germany signed on to the euro. I mean, if it wasn't better for us in the long run, we wouldn't have basically signed away our money. And people still think they just did that just because. Like, I know
this is the bizarre thing, because the German economy is going rather well, certainly rather well than virtually every other mainland European economy is, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, but everyone still thinks, but if we still had the mark, we would have got twice as much money as we do right now, which nobody can really say if that's the case. But as I said, we wouldn't have to.
Yeah, but this is the point about populism. You can basically say whatever you like because it's pie in the sky. It's
Exactly.
whenever a populist, as you see with Donald Trump now, and with Brexit now, when you have these populist movements, they can promise you the world, but when they have to actually implement them, you find out that in reality, it's not plausible. What they're saying is not really workable.
There are right-wing people in the U.S. who want to go back to the gold standard, like to the gold, like tie our currency to gold, and not to credit.
Yeah,
you know,
which is
yeah,
kind
it's
of the
ridiculous.
same thing as going back to the mark.
Yeah,
Just
it's
a few decades back instead of a few years back.
It would never happen. I mean, especially now. I mean, Germany in many ways benefits from a slightly weakened euro because it produces, you know, automobiles that then compete very well price-wise because of the weakened. You know, so there are benefits for the German economy, for the manufacturing economy, to be tied to the euro. That wouldn't be the case if it was tied to the mark and actually reflected the strength of the German economy.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what do we think? What do we think of Angela Merkel still being chancellor? Where do we feel about that?
I'm not surprised at all. And the thing with Merkel is, I don't like or dislike her because she doesn't have any stances. She's a great barometer on what is going on in Germany because she just sponges up the popular opinion. And then that's her opinion and she fights for that. So she's actually a good Democrat in that. But
yeah, it's almost like it's not really representative democracy. It's almost direct democracy in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like we basically have a queen that says what we all are saying.
That's fair enough. I mean, it's smart politics because I mean,
it really
she's
is.
done some
In
rather
that way, she will stay there forever. She will be the
exactly.
longest reigning chancellor, actually succeeding
Well,
the last CDU chancellor Helmut Kohl. And
yes, what? And that's a good old name from my childhood. Good Lord. Yeah.
yeah, the first time I ever heard about politics in any capacity is when I was about 2 years old. I asked my mother who the fat man in the newspaper was, and she said, "That is Helmut Kohl. He's the boss of Germany, and he's an asshole."
Wow.
Well, that's
Mom being honest straight
that's
up.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's. I mean, that's strong. That's strong, if somewhat brutal parenting. Nice. I like it.
So can I
Yeah, but I
speak
mean,
to
the thing
Merkel,
with
Kevin, before we move on, can I speak
with
to Merkel? Or are you still on that
oh
topic?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
I think the right word for me is that I admire Merkel. I don't know if I could say like or dislike because, I'm coming in here. She was the leader since I moved here, but I've only been in Germany since 2011. And from what I can see, Germany is very well run. It's really someone when I decided to move to Germany, I talked to a German friend. She said I was going through a bad time. She said it'd be a great place for you because it's a very safe, kind of soft, gentle, I mean, I'm not saying there are no problems here, but the quality of life that I can afford on my salary in the United States would cost a lot more because there's a lot of investment, at least in my state and in my city, Cologne, in public goods. The public parks are fantastic. They have really durable, great kids climbing things. They also have ping pong tables made of metal set up so with like a little metal fence so you can play ping pong in the parks. They have really nice designed skateboard parks in those parks, and it's I know it sounds silly, but having those places where on a Sunday when all the shops are closed because they still have Sunday closings, which is just so German, and all you can really do is go to the kiosk or get an ice cream and wander around the city with your friends or your family and take in some people who are playing music, and you walk along the Rhine and you eat your stracciatella ice, and you think, wow, this is really nice. And that's available to everybody. And in my city of Cologne, there's a massive recycling false economy almost where you pay your deposits on your plastic bottles and your glass bottles, and then again when you're in the parks on a nice summer's day with your friends and just chilling out and nobody's playing their music too loud, and because that would be rude and people would tell them off, and so there are these social norms. People come by, and if you have your 12 pack of Kölsch that you've been drinking on a hot day, and you don't want to be bothered to drag it back, it's 12 cents a bottle. You just give it to somebody. So people collect these and they take them in. It means homeless people have an alternative way of getting income than just begging or stealing. And that is something, again, that improves the quality of life for everyone. The biggest problem we have in Cologne is like bike theft. Like you have to buy a really nice lock for your bike, like spend 200 euros on your bike lock just to make sure your bike isn't stolen. That's the kind of problems we have. And so that's
well,
my
exactly.
experience of Merkel's Germany. And she's not as progressive as I would like, but I can't argue with what I see in terms of the results of her management. She shepherded the German economy through the financial crisis in a way that other countries would have loved to come out the other side of. And I think that's why you're seeing a real delay in this right-wing populism rise. Greece got it really fast because they had a massive economic crisis, and you're seeing this lagged effect from 2008, I would say still now. So yeah, I would like to have seen marriage equality before I came to Germany, not this year. And I would like to see some rethinking of their parental leave policy and the way that it sort of infantilizes women or it encourages a certain kind of motherhood rather than giving women choices. And its tax policy of still using her husband's ID number is ridiculous. So there are little things, feminist parts of me are like, oh, this is so 19th century. But generally, I think she's really run the country, managed it very well. And also, I do think she took a principled stance on the refugee entry, which I supported. And I live in a very mixed neighborhood, and my neighborhood is fine, and it has been fine. So yeah, I admire her a lot. And she's a leader of the free world right now.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, she is. Yeah. I mean, if Donald Trump's happy to essentially bend over for Vladimir Putin, he isn't of the free world. So basically, it falls to Merkel to be the leader of the free world.
Yep.
Although, of course, with Merkel being re-elected, be prepared, Germany, to be called cucks by the internet shitlords who have the mental capacity of a gnat. But yeah, to Kristi's point, from the outside, when And I agree with the point she was raising about the potential feminist changes that could and should be made in Germany. But that's the thing you've got to bear in mind, is that if that's the thing you're worried about, or if that's the change you think could make things better, if that's the thing, one of your priorities, you're in a pretty good fucking place. There are lots of countries in Europe who they literally from month to month they don't know if they can meet the government payroll. And we're talking about major countries like Spain and Italy and Portugal, and Greece obviously has had its massive problems.
Right.
So the fact that Germany is, like you say, it weathered the financial storm in a way that most countries could only have dreamt of. Certainly in Britain, it was much, much worse, and we're a similarly sized economy and all the rest of it. It's baffling that there's well, outside of the immigration issue, because it always sparks off some nonsense because you can whip up a frenzy. But outside of that, the right wing populism, it's so worrying and slightly shocking because there's no real economic reason for it in Germany. It seems to me. I could be
still
wrong. I mean,
everyone is
outside of
complaining about it, obviously, because everyone in Germany is always complaining about something. And before the refugees came, everyone was complaining about the euro and that we are paying out everyone else. Because I don't know what it is, but most Germans just love playing the victim. And not the victim as in I am the victim, but as we are the victims of everything else that's going on.
Well, to be fair, I lived in the UK, and I know some people who could moan for England. So I think maybe just moaning about things in general is a common pastime, and it's Germans and it's the Brits and Americans. I've seen countries where people just love to get together and say, "Oh, it was always better back when," or "If only we did this, things would be fixed right away." So I think it's just a person thing.
And
yeah,
it's really
that was
something
Brexit.
you can run on.
Yeah, that was Brexit. Oh, woe is us.
That was
we need special
Brexit in a
treatment.
nutshell was, the Europeans are trying to dominate us, and it was so fantastic in the past. And you think, no, it fucking wasn't. It was shit in the past, and we're the annoying prick at the table whenever we went to Europe anyway. So in a way, they'd actually be better off without us because they can actually follow a path they want to be on. But anyway,
I would still prefer it if we had you guys. I mean,
well, I would still prefer it as well. But we were always, like I say, the annoying, drunk, shouty arsehole at the table that didn't want to do what everyone else in the group wanted to do.
It's
And
the
you think,
person who's
well,
like, "Hey, I only got salad, and I don't think we want to pay the bill. I don't want to split the
exactly.
bill evenly because you had steak and I had salad."
Exactly, but that's the thing. We're the ones sat at the table with a nice big wallet, so everyone wants us there. But then you think it's you're ruining everyone's evening. Should we just chip in and tell you to piss off? It might be for the best, But there you go.
But I'd say when I go to Wales, I see a lot of EU-funded stuff going on. Which is why
Yeah,
they get anyway. I don't want to turn this into a British politics
well,
talk.
exactly, yeah, exactly. But I mean, we will reap the ill plants of the seeds we have sown in that.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's for another time.
I mean, we can talk about this when it actually happens, because so far nobody knows what Brexit really is, because somehow you voted on something where you didn't know what it would mean in the end.
Well, exactly, and it's good to know that the people who are negotiating it don't know what the fuck they want out of it either. That's going to go well. Sorry. Anyway, back to Germany. Why do we think the SPD did so poorly? Really, because you have a relatively unpopular or reasonably unpopular chancellor. You think they'd be able to tap into that to a much bigger extent than they have? Because I mean, they're not actually that far ahead of AfD, really.
Yeah, I think it's their lowest I've read, but I don't know if that's true. I didn't check it. I will check that later. That this is their lowest ever outcome. And I think that's mostly because people don't trust the SPD anymore and just see that there are two other parties to the left, the Greens and the left, or Die Grüne and Die Linke, that do the left stuff better, and the SPD just kind of stayed where it was all the time, and everyone else just kind of passed them by.
So that happened on the left, and then the more labor people who were into protectivism, went
exactly.
ADF or AFD, sorry, Alternative for Deutschland, yeah.
Also,
so
I
they
mean,
got pulled in both directions, just like, if there was an actual liberal, like an SNP in Scotland, you look what happened to Labour in Scotland in 2015.
Also, I think it's difficult to run on isn't Angela Merkel a piece of shit ticket when you've been
everyone is running on that
minor party coalition with her for the last few years. It's sort of basically saying, yeah, she's a piece of shit and we're kind of a piece of shit too. Like, that's not really going to work as a message, is it? It seems.
Although the guy they had as chancellor, who was going to be the chancellor if they won, which has always been unlikely, but they actually had some guy who had been running the EU Parliament for years and had been doing a good job of it, called Martin Schulz.
Yeah,
and
exactly. But wasn't he so confident a few weeks ago that he publicly offer Angela Merkel a job in his cabinet or something ridiculous?
Yeah, he did. But if you actually watched that in German, you would understand that that was like joking in the eyes of defeat. Like some killer robot is looking down on you and you say, want to buy ice cream.
Yeah, but that's almost worse in a way, because I'd rather him be cocky and come up short than basically say weeks before the vote, oh yeah, we're definitely going to lose. Let's just have a laugh with it. That's
talking about Schulz.
That's ridiculous.
Have you guys seen this subreddit, the Schulz?
No.
No.
Tell us, for those of people unfamiliar with it, maybe give some background and what it is all about.
So, you guys all know about the Donald on Reddit, I presume, which is a racist, hate-mongering, really, really big subreddit devoted to basically filleting Donald Trump. This is a parody of it with Martin Schulz instead of Donald Trump, because Martin Schulz is very much the opposite of Donald Trump, so it's kind of funny to do that. Like, he is from a very poor background, and he's left-leaning, and he's very well-spoken, and he's pro-European and anti-nationalism.
Is that make Europe great again?
Yes, it is.
Delightful.
And so when the media read about this, which happened like 2 days after he announced that he was running, the German media jumped on this. And a lot of this obviously is meant a bit cheeky. Like, they support the SPD and left-wingers in general, but it's still taking the piss. But the media kind of ran with it, and so they kind of said that the SPD was getting stronger when everyone was really just making fun of this. So,
well, yeah, I think that's a problem around the world, actually, is that the old media, the traditional media, newspapers and 24-hour news and all of that, although it's hard to speak of the 24-hour news channels as old media, but just me being old, that they have not caught up with internet culture at all. They don't know how to interact with it. Actually, one of the bizarrely, even though she lost, probably the best example of someone who did kind of get it and made I think a rather good speech about the deplorables, as it were, was Hillary Clinton. He did understand it to a certain extent, but the American media were piss poor at interpreting it and actually broadcasting about it. And it seems the German media, I know for a fact that the British media are terrible at it, and the German media seem just as behind the curve, as it were.
The weird thing is that a lot of the, I don't know how you would call that, like what for you is a BBC, what you pay for with your taxes, actually have good stuff on YouTube. Like, they know how to produce YouTube stuff, but they don't know how to interact with the rest of the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, yeah, the BBC don't really. The BBC are really stuffy. They don't know how to interact with anyone, really. To be honest, it's a
Especially
very
not the
strange thing.
internet.
Well, I think
Especially
what they
not the
do is
internet, yeah.
report, and they don't always understand the context, which you say is basically restating your point, Kevin. But they don't understand where this is situated within, like you said, internet culture. And so instead of reporting on internet culture and its presentation in this way, they report it as, it seems like, more straight news. And yeah, and then they get it wrong. But hello?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I kind of think this point is done, but I don't know where to move on to next because
Well,
I
isn't there a
actually planned
discussion
out
about the
what to do,
Jamaican,
and we kind of jumped straight in, so I kind of
Jamaica
have to.
coalition?
Yeah, talking about which coalitions would be possible. That's a good idea. Let me start by saying we only one time had no coalition. You guys in the UK are now really worried about having this hung parliament. For us, this is normal. We have many parties, so it's unlikely to get 50% on your own. Only in 1957, the CDU had the government to themselves with more than 50%. Otherwise, everyone has to find coalition partners, which means getting more than 22%.
Does that work out? I mean, obviously, it works out well in the sense that Germany's done rather well, but it seems basically based on economics that if your economy's going well, it's all together, but it's when it goes badly, like in Italy where they have a new government every fortnight, it seems. It would be interesting to see whether the coalition would be survivable if the German economy did go bad.
To that point, I just can say that in the time when the CDU actually held the government for themselves, the German economy was better than it ever was before or after. I don't know if that proves your point or not.
Well, I don't know, but it's
What time period was that? Was that a period of like
it was
the
in
90s?
the Wirtschaftswunder, late 50s.
Oh, okay. So it was like a post-war
Yeah.
expansion. So maybe if you were to economically control for other post-war expansion economies, you would find a rate of growth that would have been the actual rate of growth comparable to other rates of growth when you don't have to have all the construction and import the labor and there's a boom in the economy. So,
And Kristi, do
yeah.
you know, you should know this. I think this is what you do. As I said, I'm always confused about what exactly it is you do.
I'm a political scientist.
Yeah, so would it be possible to prove or disprove Kevin's claim, or are those numbers too new to do such a thing?
Can you restate Kevin's claim again? What
my,
your
my,
theory?
my
Yeah.
claim. It's not a claim so much as just a sort of vague theory in my head that it's much easier for a coalition, even if it's a coalition of the left and the right, let alone on any. Sorry, especially if it's on the left and right. Obviously, it's slightly easier if they're both on the right or both on the left. But basically, if the economy does well, it's much easier for a coalition to hold itself together than if the economy goes badly, as in, say, Italy recently.
Yeah, you could test that. You could look at the number of times a government coalition has collapsed in, say, a 40-year time period as your dependent variable, the thing you want to explain. And then you could put in factors in there like economic growth or unemployment or the inflation rate or being, I don't know, some other exogenous factor like an attack or something. And then you could control for the other factors and isolate. This is what regression does. The amount of variance in the number of coalitions that were based on economic factors. So yeah, that's a question we could, it's more political economy, but you could certainly empirically estimate that for, say, European countries over a 4-decade period.
All right.
Yeah.
Political scientists, so yeah, like a regression. and stats. So.
Looking at those numbers, it seems to me that there's no other option to go forward than another, as they call it, great coalition, and that is great as in big, not as in amazing, which is the CDU and the SPD together. Everything else doesn't really work.
Yeah, great.
Last time.
Well, wouldn't the yellow and the green plus CDU?
Oh yeah, that would work as well. The so-called Jamaica coalition, that would work.
The Jamaica coalition.
Yeah, yeah.
That is what the German media calls it.
Oh, that's delightful. Oh, I like that.
If that becomes, the working government, they'll have to have a temporary theme song that's some kind of reggae.
Oh no,
That would be great.
I don't want to hear German reggae.
Yeah, I think a German reggae song would be, I think, a crime against humanity, frankly. But
well, maybe they could get Seed in to do it.
Kevin, there around here, there are a lot of gospel choirs, and all of them have no black people.
white gospel choirs. I mean,
white German gospel choirs.
I just want to. It's like you want to say to Germany, "Go home. You're drunk. Just stop. This is wrong." And I think if Germany starts playing reggae, it's at that point we have to. I think we, as European nations, we would have to have an intervention and sit Germany down. And, look, Germany, we love you, and we're here because we're worried about you. You're hurting yourself, and you're hurting reggae.
There's actually a good dancehall band from Berlin, but they have non-white members and they don't do straight reggae. They kind of do their own thing. They're called Seed with 3 E's. So there's such a thing as German reggae, and there is a lot of good German hip-hop. There's a fuck ton of really shitty German hip-hop, but there's good German hip-hop.
I would definitely recommend anyone watching this hangout or afterwards to go type in Seed with 3 E's. Check out some of their music. It's good. And Peter Fox too. I like his.
Yeah, that is one of the guys from Seed, his solo project, which wasn't a wasn't a reggae project, more of a hip hop project. But yeah, that was a really good album.
Yeah, there's a nice, when German rap, the nice thing about it, I guess, all right, so this is going to be off elections, but so if you look at classical music and you compare Italian opera to German opera, Italian opera has longer vowel sounds and it's much softer, whereas German opera is more staccato. And that's why I think in a lot of ways, German is a good language for rap because it itself is much a language of staccato, and so even if you don't understand it, it's still, you can kind of groove to it. So check it out. All right, I'll stop now.
Peter Fox, Alles Neu, which is basically a get off my ass kind of song about him making choices in his life, going on, leaving his old life behind, which uses what you just said very well.
Yeah. And if you're learning German, it's really good practice to get your pronunciation and enunciation down.
And your curse words.
Yeah, those
and
too.
learn your curse words, yeah.
All right, back to the election.
I was gonna do a joke, but actually, fuck it, I'll do it. Richard Coughlan already did a German hip hop act called "Nazis with Attitude." God.
I haven't heard that before. I didn't watch much of Coughlan stuff yet, but that is.
Sorry, there we go. Yeah, but that was actually like a joke thing where he did Nazi themed rap.
Yes, obviously,
including singing "Go Hitler, go Hitler, go Hitler, go Hitler, go." It was really, really silly, but quite funny. Anyway, I think do I owe Coughlan money for singing that bit now? It's copyright, doesn't it?
He might owe you money for the plug.
Yeah, exactly. Advertisement. Yeah.
Does Peter Fox owe us?
Oh, don't know. So should we get back to, is there anything other going forward now? If we did have the Jamaica coalition, what kind of policies do you see coming out of that kind of government?
The thing is, the FDP, let's get in the FDP first. They are the Libertarian Party, FDP means Freie Demokraten, so free Democrats. And one thing I have to point out is their fucking campaign this year. So they had pictures like this, which is so different from other posters. And if you just see a poster like this next to all the stuffy shit the other parties were doing, you think to yourself, this is something hip and new.
What does that say on the actual poster?
Oh, the world's best education for everyone.
That doesn't sound very libertarian.
And then underneath it's saying we have new thinking or something like that? Or
yeah, let us think anew.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
And the thing is, the photographer of this usually does the Playboy and the Rolling Stone, and he shot bands like Bon Jovi, Sting, R.E.M., and Die Ärzte. I don't know why they thought they should shoot what is obviously the John Sim version of the Doctor Who master in such a way, but they did, and I think actually that this campaign worked because this got people thinking that this is actually an alternative to both the parties currently residing in the Bundestag and the AfD, despite this party being the party that has always dragged down the government in a way. The CDU often uses them to get a coalition, and then they just kind of pull the CDU a bit more to the right, even more to the right, when it comes to economy. So them saying we are actually a new power is so wrong, and I don't know how this ad campaign, everyone was talking about this ad campaign because it was so different to everything else, really convinced people of this.
Yeah, well, I obviously I was an outsider, but it doesn't seem that the German people, by and large anyway, would be receptive to a libertarian message, even one well presented.
Well, is this the business party?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah, so they're like, the economic Tories.
Basically.
Oh, okay.
Bourgeois people who,
Yeah.
who like to wear labeled articles of clothing and drive fancy cars and own their own business and stuff. So they economically draw the CDU to, that sort of small taxation economic model when they join them in a coalition,
basically.
is my impression.
And in the whole time that Kohl was the chancellor, they were always the people helping him get his coalition. So in those 16 years... Yeah, Kevin?
No, sorry, go
on. In those 16 years, which was a long stretch of German politics in which we actually got the GDR back, but in those times we always had this very, very right-wing government, and I kind of fear that we are going back to that now. The times are changing again, and is it just me or is everyone, not just in Germany, going further to the right?
Why would the Greens join that coalition?
That is a good question, and I kind of don't understand it.
Surely,
because there are a lot of people in the Green Party who aren't economically left. They are just left when it comes to stuff like marriage equality and, of course, the environment. But otherwise, they are very well off at this point. the whole party is a party of like teachers, no offense, Kristi, and bankers who have a bit of interest in keeping the planet as it is, but they aren't really left wing.
Well, surely they would join that coalition just to make the Jamaica thing work, because that sounds cool.
Yeah, they
And they really
the
like
Green
reggae.
Party wants to make the Jamaica thing work in more ways than once. They are one of the party that wants to legalize marijuana.
But that's the thing, because without the green involved there, you've just got yellow and black, and that's just ANCAP, and no one wants that. No one wants that.
Well, more importantly, it only gets them to like 44%.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point. I don't know quite how it works. Is it possible for a minority government to rule?
No.
Do they have to have 50% for the parliament to stand?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise there would
because,
be
for instance,
too much grumbling, I think.
Oh no, but this is my point. Is it possible for that to go ahead though? Say if they a coalition that got to 48% or something, would that be actually allowed under the rules?
I don't think it would be allowed in the national government. I know that it could be a thing, and I know somebody's going to correct me on this if it's in any or just in a few. In the lands, not in the whole state, but in the lands, something like this is possible under some circumstances, but it's very unlikely. Usually you find your partners and go. Like they need the Greens.
Okay.
And the Bundeslands are the states for Americans.
Our lands are the states. It's confusing as fuck too. And
because the British government currently is, I was just going to say the current British government is technically a minority government.
Is it still, even with the DUP?
Well, it's not on a formal coalition. They've got a kind of case by case, sort of issue by issue agreement, but it's not actually a coalition.
They're friends with benefits.
Yeah, and they're fucking the British taxpayer to the cost of £1 billion for Northern Ireland. 10 votes. It's ridiculous. Anyway.
Did anyone know about the DUP before this happened, or was it?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah, because they're really, really nasty right-wing bastards with lots of terrorist connections.
Yeah. But is it just you because you follow this type of shit, or is it the?
Oh yeah,
that's just Kevin. No. Most people, I mean, unless you're in Northern Ireland, the DUP was just one of those other parties under the Greens on election night. You know, they were just
basically They if you're on the mainland, basically people on the mainland treat Northern Ireland as long as it's quiet, that's all they care about. As long as things aren't exploding, that's fine. No one cares about the politics. They just assume they're all fucking crazy, which is not entirely untrue. But
that's not an inaccurate description of. There is a reason why it's the qualitative election study of Britain or the British election study, because Northern Ireland has their own studies. Like they need their own studies. It's a completely different.
Yeah, basically Northern Ireland is essentially a sectarian head count. You might as well say Catholics stick your hands up, Protestants stick your hands up. There you go. You get 10 seats, you get 8 seats. We'll see you in 4 years, you know.
When I actually moved to the AFD, we held this off long enough. I think I'm ready for this.
Okay, so do you want to talk about the implications of them getting this amount of the vote in terms of their development as a party first?
Yeah, let me just say they didn't actually exist 4 years ago. I think they were on the ballot last time, but got no votes because they not as in no votes at all, but under 5% of the vote, because they were just founded and they really weren't as nasty as they are now. When they started, they basically wanted the mark back and opt out of the EU maybe, and that was it. But then
what was it that led to that change?
That is the thing. Nobody really knows. But the thing is,
Well, there was a
At the same time,
discussion
the
about
party
this
formed.
in my hangout.
There
There was
was-
a bit of a discussion of this in my hangout, and the description I recall was that there was another movement that kind of came
Yeah, that is.
into it.
I was gonna get into Pegida
Okay.
right now.
Okay, great. Oh yeah, Pegida, that was it.
Pegida,
Oh,
yeah.
Pegida. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the same time when the AfD was picking up steam with their anti-EU, like this, not the other way around, anti-EU rhetoric, there was a thing called Pegida, which is patriotic Europeans against the Islamization of the Occident.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
which
we're
was
aware of Pegida. There's a Pegida UK, which is
no,
very
no.
racist. Yeah. I swear to God,
did-
yeah. Yeah, Tommy Robinson, who you may know from the English Defence League, and he now works for Rebel Media. He was involved, and indeed is involved, with Pegida UK, which is affiliated to the German Pegida.
The German Pegida actually doesn't exist anymore. They still are in
Oh, okay.
Dresden every Monday, but nobody goes.
Okay.
Instead, they all just go to the AfD. The
Oh, there
guy
you go.
who formed the party actually left, and now it's just the far-right weirdos. And they
Well, that's the thing.
run on.
This always goes the way with any of these extreme movements. Actually, if you look at the early inklings of the KKK, many of the people who founded the KKK left not that long after founding it because it got out of hand. People to the table, things go fucking crazy. It always happens.
And the thing is that before all the Nazis joined, they weren't as big as they are now. So they got more popular by basically becoming a Nazi party than being a normal right-wing party, which worries me. I mean,
Yeah,
you're obviously not a
that's pretty
right-winger,
terrifying.
but I still think that it's weird that people respond better to Nazis than to normal right-wingers.
Well, it sounds like what they did was because of the way the party system had been set up in the past, this was an opportunity for people in this generation to have a party with those positions because they took over a party. You know, if you had tried to found the Pegida party, that would have been a much different story and it would have been more hard work. But if they took over something, then it's easier to just co-opt its structures and everything else that it's already done for you. So it might have just been kind of a market thing that people who might not have otherwise voted would then be attracted to that party, whereas otherwise they might have sat out the election because they didn't see anything that they wanted to vote for.
That is true. But
I mean, it's a possibility. There might be a lot of reasons for it, but that's like based on what I've seen in other political systems. You know, like UKIP didn't exist once the problem went away. So, you know, people looked for UKIP as a solution in a few elections, but then when the problem went away, they left them again. So sometimes a party can kind of catch a moment, like the Pirate Party. You know, you catch a moment in time on an issue, and there is this sort of emergence then of people who see that as an option that they didn't have before, and the AfD weren't there before. So yeah.
and I am honestly still. I said I wasn't shocked anymore, but just having this number on the screen all the time, which is sinking, but it's still more than 13%. It just more than every 10th person I meet on the street has voted for the AfD.
Well,
Even
there's
if it,
presumably
as they say,
there's presumably regional differences, so it might not
yeah,
be
obviously, but
necessarily your area. But I don't know. Maybe you live in it could be worse. It could be 2 out of every 10 in your area. Who knows? I don't know the regional breakdown.
I'm gonna look it up because I actually think I live in a rather green and CDU area, so yeah.
Yeah, my impression, and I could be wrong, but I thought that was the AfD were stronger in the South.
No, in the East, in the former
the East.
GDR.
Okay.
They are the strongest.
Okay.
Would I be right in
CSU being more conservative?
Would I be right in
CDU?
Yeah. Would I be right in thinking that the Eastern Bloc is probably more prone to voting extreme just on the basis that democracy isn't as well rooted there in its populace?
That is not the main issue. The main issue is that they are still economically weaker than the rest of Germany because they didn't have the Wirtschaftswunder. We still reap some benefits from that, and the East basically did nothing for 40 years, and we put not much in there now. So it's basically a country that actually suffered the consequences of the war more than the rest of Germany did. And that is why they are kind of prone to this kind of stuff. If you come to them with an easy solution, they will eat it up.
Yeah.
Which is not
well, actually,
the case in
to
the rest of
an extent that explains the point I was making earlier about how, or the answers my not trying to think of a reason why, because of the economic prosperity of Germany, why that would be the case. But if the East is economically deprived, that is the absolute breeding ground for far right nonsense. That makes sense now.
Are you going to be able to pull up online the breakdown of party distributions by state?
Yeah, sure. Any idea where?
Well, try Google.
Yeah, I'm on Google, but you said I never done a.
Well, it's just sometimes when they have the breakdowns, they not only have the overall totals. I don't know if a news website might have it also, like each state's breakdown as well, or an election results.
Would they have
website.
I'm gonna do this on the other screen. I'm gonna
Yeah, so Kevin, you
see
go
if
ahead.
somebody posted it.
I was just going to say, would they have that kind of breakdown so soon afterward? Because in Britain, it generally takes a little longer than that.
Well, the reason it takes you guys longer is because you count them by hand.
we count them as God intended. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, basically, we're in the 15th century still. It's fine.
I just
we literally yeah, go on.
On the official page on the other screen, I have two screens set up here, so you just see what I want you to see, and I do everything else on the other screen. And I see.
Oh, you're mysterious, Ruben. You're very mysterious.
Can you copy
it's inscrutable.
Can you copy and paste the link?
And the link that I found, which somebody posted to Reddit, where do I actually post this?
If you copy the address and then post it into the
if you just copy. Yeah, exactly. Just copy and paste the link and open a new tab and just pop it in there.
Is what Kevin was talking about. They don't have the numbers yet, but the numbers would be shown here. As you can see, there are no numbers in there yet.
Yeah, because I'm genuinely interested to see if the German vote went similarly to how the French vote broke down on age, because that would play into my theory. And they've just gone back up to 13.3%, which is annoying. But yeah, they've it was mainly younger people that were drawn toward Marine Le Pen, who was obviously the equivalent in France. And my hypothesis on that, although you need to look into it more, I suppose, by asking them, would be that because they're so far detached from where far right politics had torn Europe asunder 70 years ago, that essentially they them back from voting this way, and they've allowed their disenfranchisement, and I think rightly they feel disenfranchised from the economic system as it's currently constructed, and they've gone to the far right in much bigger numbers than their older compatriots, which was borne out by the fact that those that were 65 plus almost exclusively didn't vote for Marine Le Pen. I think she was down at like 9% or something in the over 65 category, which is astonishingly low because they're generally more conservative older people. But it'd be interesting to see if Germany goes that way as well. So, but we won't know that until later, obviously.
I was actually going to ask you whether you think that people on the internet who target young people in a right-wing way are a problem for actual politics.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you can see their talking points being actual politicians. Now you have in America, what's the name of the guy, the senator, whose name I've told, was it Hatch, possibly Orrin Hatch, who was going on about. He didn't use the phrase white genocide, but he used basically the argument, suggesting that white people were being discouraged from breeding, which is a right-wing talking point that these shitlords have been expressing for years, which we were able to laugh about 3 or 4 years back even. But now you think, well, actually, it's clearly having an impact.
So now we have to take them seriously.
Oh, but I've been arguing for a long time we should be taking them seriously because they're a serious threat. They're not. They don't have serious arguments, but they have a serious threat. They're having an impact.
And also,
what can
I
we
don't know
actually...
if you guys. Well, also there's okay. You finish this, and then I've got a point on how social media is used to direct campaigns. But if you want to ask a follow-up question,
Yeah, I was just going to ask a little follow-up question, which you could actually tie yours into, I think. What can we actually do to be an alternative for them? Because obviously there are a lot of young people who feel left behind. And I can see where they are coming from. I'm completely down on my luck right now, but that doesn't mean I will become an arsehole.
Yeah.
Can we actually build an alternative for people who are like me but are being pulled into the right way? Or
well, if Kristi wants to go
people,
first, then
honestly, this is my second time
no,
voting.
this is a really complicated question. This is a hugely complicated question.
Okay, well,
so you go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, firstly, like with anything, you need to drain a swamp in order to stop the monsters from creeping out of that swamp. Comes from is, like I say, the economic disenfranchisement of young people. So you need to actually make it so that, as their parents and grandparents had, the baby boomers and the Gen X type people, that if you have a full-time job, you should be able to afford a home and a family. Yeah. That shouldn't be a crazy distant dream, which for people of my generation it is. You can't, you simply can't do it. It's not possible. And so you need to have a readjustment of the economic system. How you go about that is, I think, probably far above my capabilities and my pay grade. But I would suggest that making it so that they have an economic interest in the betterment and the continuation of their society, rather than literally being left in a situation where they say, fuck it, burn it down, by voting for someone like Donald Trump or Marine Le Pen, Geert Wilders, AFD, whoever.
I think
a good place to start.
Yeah, I think the challenge the left has is that our responses to those problems deal with concepts like economic systems and government policy, and the far right blame people, and it's emotive and it's fear-based and anger-based, and it's very hard to compete with that, with a like a rational economic message that takes 5 minutes to explain. I'm not saying it's wrong, but there are emotive elements to our arguments that it's much more difficult for us to make because we're honestly answering the question and we're going up against propaganda.
Well, I'm not just talking about the left. I'm talking about people who have an interest in democracy. So I'm talking about conservatives, centre left, centre right, even relatively not far left or far right, but relatively sort of out there people, but who want to continue extreme right wing people. How do you stop those people? Because I'm not really in the, I'm in the interest of just stopping conservatism in general, but I'd much rather have conservatism than fascism, if you see what I mean.
But there are a lot of bougie kind of neo-Nazis now, a lot of middle class comfortable, well-off white kids who are doing this. So an economic message isn't really going to.
No, but I think you would drain away a lot of the support, and certainly a more significantly large proportion of that support than would be necessary to kill them as an effective movement, if you made it so that economic disenfranchisement wasn't an absolute cornerstone of life for younger people. I think you would drain enough of it away. And even if they then turned to conservatism, I think that would be a massive win for humanity in of itself.
No, no,
So I don't think it's no. I don't.
People,
I
the
don't see it as
conservatives
just.
are as much of the devil as the left wing is.
Well, here's
Like-
the difference. I would rather be arguing about tax policy with conservatives than race realism with white supremacists. I think that's
Wait,
Kevin's point.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. Whether it's a left-wing party or a right-wing party, a centrist party, whatever, there needs to be a consensus built, and I actually think based around what was the post-war consensus, that basically you make people's lives economically comfortable enough so that they don't turn into fascists. That was something the previous generations had understood and put in place, that unfortunately modern Reaganite economics does not. And I think that's, you can lead directly back from Reaganomics to the current state we're in.
Especially to Donald Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you lead to this feeling of absolute alienation from a society rather than feeling you have a vested interest in it.
Another thing that might have swept the AFD and this whole thing you were talking about into power is not might be, but I actually have a theory on how this works, is the refugee crisis, the so-called refugee crisis, which is a crisis for the refugees, not for us. But Martin Schulz said that the refugees are a gift for German culture, which I agree with, because they mix things up. They will be a gift for German culture in a few years. But they are not only a gift for German culture, but also for German right-wing populism, because now they have a boogeyman. We don't have enough Jews anymore. Now we have some Muslims.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. It's, I've said this for a long time. If you take populist trash that you read on the internet and replace the word Muslim with Jew, you have absolutely archetypical 1930s and 40s German Nazi propaganda. It's almost word for word the same playbook. But going back to my point about economic disenfranchisement, I think that's that leads to the breeding ground for this kind of thing. If you have an economically very well-off nation as a whole, people are less bothered by immigrants. Not to say there won't be problems and there won't be some people who are always going to be racist pricks about it, but generally speaking, if you have a full-time job that pays enough for you to have a house and a family, your kids have a good school to go to, generally speaking, the crime rate is low and people feel like the system is fair, then people don't really give too much of a fuck about immigrants, to be honest. It's only when you have some of those problems that the boogeyman of, oh, it's the Muslim or the Jew or the refugee, whatever, becomes a persuasive argument for people.
And it runs really deep through German media. And if you just listen to the radio, I only listen to like the NDR, which is state funded. Even if you listen to that, you hear this undertone sometimes of those people don't really belong here. That is the other.
Reuven, if I might, one thing that I've come to learn being in Germany more recently than when I first got here, because I didn't speak enough German to understand, but America always talks about itself as an immigrant nation and how people have come from all over the world because it's a country that attracts the best and the brightest and people who want to work hard and make something of themselves. And one thing that came up actually in the conversation I had with my two German friends in our hangout was actually the important role immigration has played in modern German history and making Germany into the economy it is today, about after the post-war period, and the different people who came to rebuild the country, to rebuild the economy, to strengthen the economy and kind of turn it into this sort of powerhouse. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak a bit as a German about German history vis-a-vis immigration and sort of how that, where this refugee crisis or the influx, the taking in of refugees fits within German history in that way.
Before I go into that, one point, we really need a good term for what is happening with Germany and the refugees right now.
I agree.
Yeah, I haven't found
Or
one
the intake.
in English or in German. If you
Yeah.
find one, message me, and if I find one, I'll message you. But the thing is that first, the Italians came basically to help us out and because we had jobs. And in those days, the Italians were always the other, the bad guy who was coming to take German jobs, even though they were helping us too. They were helping themselves and they were helping rebuild the country. Then a few decades later, the Turks came, and then the Italians were German friends who came from Italy, and the Turks were the new bad people. That both happened before my time, and now Turkish people are like normal German guys who have a background somewhere else, and they are a big part of German culture. We mentioned hip hop before, obviously, but also when it comes to restaurants, you go to a Turk or to an Italian because they are all over the place and they really belong here.
I did mention having an ice on a Sunday, didn't I?
Yeah.
It's not ice cream. It's Italian. It's Italian. How do you pronounce it?
Gelato.
Yeah, gelato. And it's gorgeous. And it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it really is. We have like 3 in my town of them, and I don't live in something like Cologne. I live in something tiny.
But to your point about the waves of immigrants and how they basically, I think the word to use is assimilate, don't they? They assimilate.
Yes, no, they don't really assimilate themselves that much. They still keep their own culture a lot.
Okay, well, they're assimilated. They're accepted as part of the kind of the group, the in group.
Speak German.
That seems like a rather universal thing, because, or certainly in the West, it's that way, because that's the way it's gone throughout American history, certainly. That's the way it is here in Britain, when those of the West Indies, as it's called, the Anglophone Caribbean nations, and Guyana on the South American mainland, when they came in the 50s, they were seen as the outsider, but were eventually accepted. And then you had people from the Indian subcontinent who came, and they were the outsider, and then they were accepted. And now you've got people from, say, Eastern Europe, largely Poland and the Baltic nations, and they were seen as the outsider, and now they're okay, basically. And now it's the Syrians or whatever, and that's the way it always goes. When they say they don't assimilate, they basically do. They get accepted as part of the thing. They culturally enrich the place, and then the next group is the And it's one of the sad things is to see people from the previous waves of immigrant groups try and essentially pull up the ladder behind them, buying into the anti-immigrant bullshit, even though they're the sons of or the grandsons of immigrants themselves. Yeah, that's the really.
Sorry, Kevin, to interrupt, but the first focus group that I ran in 2005 or attended it included someone who was a second or third generation from, I think he was from Pakistan. And during the course of it, because of 2005 immigration was an issue, immigration came up, and he was complaining about Polish and Romanian people coming in. And it was just, he would just, it was like other people around the table expressed the same view, but it kind of hit me like that kind of, don't you get it? I mean, and that was an assumption on my part that I realized I was assuming his politics because of his ethnicity, and that was a mistake. So I had to sort of like treat everybody as based on what their views are, not what I necessarily assumed about them or thought about them because of the demographic they fit into. But yeah, I can definitely, at least anecdotally, verify that those opinions are out there because people feel British, and like people feel British and Scottish, or British and English, or British and Welsh, or British and and maybe from Afghanistan. These dual identities can exist, and that does so that it's the Britishness part of it, of saying this is our island, it's really small, we can't fit any more people.
Well, actually, a bizarre thing. Not to get, I don't want to make this too British, too much about Britain, but a fantastic example of that was when the West Indian cricket team were playing in England, and you had Ian Wright, who, for those who don't know, was a black English footballer / soccer player for the Americans, who had played for the England team and felt himself very much English. And he was asked by a West Indian commentator who he would be supporting, England or the West Indies, because that's a thing that's happened with previous generations of immigrants who have continued to support both the ancestral, their grandparents' homelands in the Caribbean or with England. And he was really offended that he would even be asked that, because he said, "Well, I support England, obviously." It didn't even enter his head that he would support another team against England. And you think, well, that seems so strange that you would be offended by that, because that's just a thing, isn't it?
But I think
why would you not have that?
I think it speaks to the education that he grew up in his identity. And maybe in his household, his ties weren't that important, but he was raised in the British system. And so, like other kids raised in the British
system.
True,
but his mother was from Jamaica. So, I mean, it just seems really odd that you would be offended by it. But anyway, I'm not going to tell him how to live his life. He's perfectly entitled to it. But
well, I'm just saying that identity transcends ethnic background, even within one generation.
Yeah.
So, identity is a complicated subject, even if people deny the identity is a thing.
I can't wait for the AFD. I can't wait for the AFD to have someone running called, I don't know, Mehmet or something. Would be a fun combination.
Their main candidate, well, one of them is called Alice Weidel. Alice is how we pronounce Alice for some reason, who is a lesbian woman. So they already have this one is okay, it's only the other ones that suck friend.
Well, that's not exclusive.
Pull out some Mehmet or Mohammed very soon.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That sort of always happens. It's tokenism, isn't it? Really, but it's not exclusive, of course, because you have previously Pim Fortuyn in the Netherlands as well, who was a homosexual fascist, for want of a better phrase. They do this all the time. It's the Milo syndrome of, well, you can't attack me as a fascist because I like to suck dick. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I would say that
it's a very, very classy way to get out of being called a fascist. You don't really have to change your views. Just go suck a dick. I think sucking a dick would be easier than changing your views, honestly.
Well, if I could come in on the issue of bringing a bunch of people in who have only sort of lived under a totalitarian state, and I don't know the German rhetoric of the policies well enough to know if this was ever a point, but one of the great opportunities that Germany has, and maybe of course a Christian party wouldn't argue this, but is to show what a secular state is like for people who have never had the opportunity to live under one, and to explore ideas and things that they maybe otherwise could not have had the opportunity to do, and experience things that they would never have and necessarily had the opportunity to, and to model to people who, a lot of whom, to be honest, might go back to their homes when things have settled down and they're not worried for their lives all the time. Bring back those norms and that perspective in terms of what society they can build going forward.
I never thought about it.
True, but the one thing I will say is that, actually, to be fair, I don't want to defend Assad at all, but it was actually a secular society, Syria.
That's true. I mean, they had pretty intense religious divisions, and I don't know to what extent.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
Maybe.
And Kristi, I know you know this, but I think you might have misled our viewers. Even though we are ruled by something called the Christian Democrats, this is a secular country. It's just that the ruling party says it's inspired by Christianity, which I would argue it's not, but that's a topic for another time.
Well, I was going to ask you. Sorry, just to clarify, what I meant was that a Christian party might not take up the whole idea of here's a secular state and let's celebrate the secular state, considering they do have the name of Christian party. Like we don't really have actually any parties that promote, I think, boldly, let's be more secular and, that kind of thing. I mean, I know there's divisions in atheism rates between the East and the West, but I think that is I wouldn't expect that to be, at least coming from the Christian parties, that kind of rhetoric.
I was going to ask,
No,
actually,
not that kind of rhetoric, but they support secularism.
Well, I was just going to ask,
Well,
actually, how Christian are the Christian Democrats? Is because I don't get the feeling that Germany's a massively religious place.
Well, they
It's
do have the
really
state
not.
tax. They do. You guys have the state tax or the church tax. Sorry, I mean you do use
Yeah,
the
we
government
do
to
have.
basically run as a
Yeah,
bursary
if
all
you
the
are
costs
part
of
of a
co-living.
church. If
Right,
you are part of a
but
church.
the government takes that money and they process it and they pay it out. So all those costs are then taken off of the church. So that's also like almost an in-kind gift by the state every time they get a paycheck.
Well, true, but I mean, we have an official state religion here, but that doesn't actually mean we're religious. We're very irreligious here.
You do?
That wasn't. I mean, in terms
Yeah,
of
the queen is the head of the
the actual
church.
political.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
guys
I
are
mean,
weird.
in theory, we should be. In theory, we should be way more religious than America, because America is technically a secular country, but it's not actually a secular country at all.
But all the fundamentalists fled and they fled over to America. That's what.
Well, exactly. Well, that's the way I feel about the Netherlands. Actually, is that the reason they were so progressive is because all their right-wing fuckers pissed off to South Africa. Which is, to my point, we should get all the fascists and just drop them on an island somewhere, and then we can all live in peace, and they'll kill each other. Fuck it.
Yeah, white crime rates are not going to change just because a bunch of white people are living together. They're still going to have the same crime rate. It's just going to be all white, except it's going to be 100% white people are guilty. So, yeah. Anyway, I think Reuven, you were going to say something before.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say actually, because I think Kristi kind of answered my questions, kind of gave my answers to Kevin's questions, and actually answered the questions I would have had on what.
See, that's the thing. Kristi's so good; she answers questions before they've even been fucking asked.
Yes,
it's amazing.
Yeah, like I don't know what to say anymore because she already said everything. I mean, it was a good idea of you to invite her, Kevin, but I'm kind of out of a job right now.
Yeah, she's on the verge of dividing by zero. That's what's happening here. It's amazing.
We shouldn't.
It's pretty hard.
We shouldn't have scientists in the hangout anymore. They're too smart for us, Kevin.
Absolutely.
So I guess I don't know when we started this. I have no idea how long we've been going. But
we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes. I wanted to bring up a few more things before we close out.
All right, let's go. I mean, I'm having fun, but I wanted to, just kind of check.
Yeah, I mean, we could go for a few more minutes, and I have a few more questions for you two, and then something light to end the stream. The first thing is, ever noticed how all the women in politics are right-leaning and the left-leaning women don't seem to make it that far? Even though to me, if you aren't a straight white male, I don't see how you can be anything else but an SJW. Seriously, I don't understand conservative and conservative women and conservative gay people, conservative black people, and so on. What is it with people like Merkel or even worse, Petri and what's the face, Alice Weidel?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, because I've been in the Women in Politics sort of section of the Political Studies Association for, going on a decade almost. I've seen papers. One of the things that we study a lot in, Women in Politics is representation, and a subcategory of that is women executives. What the pattern seems to be, and I don't think it's surprising, but because women are perceived as naturally pacifists, it is difficult for some men, but also some women, to perceive a sort of generic woman as maybe having the masculine qualities of ruthless military determination in situations of foreign crises. And so what you find is that when women run on the right, they run as sort of conservative, sort of mothers, but also in a a very tough way, a very almost masculine way, and they try to come across as incredibly almost hawkish, very aggressive on foreign policy and military actions in order to overcompensate for that perceived deficiency. And that is why it's usually the case that when women are put as leaders of the party, they have those characteristics, and those parties tend to be right-leaning, and so they tend to lead right-leaning parties. And when they become executives, you get that disproportionate skew of right-leaning women to left-leaning women as executives.
All right.
Yeah, well, actually, again, I can only really speak from a British perspective. Apologies. I wish I
That
could
is why you are here,
give you
Kevin.
give you slightly more.
Just to
But there's a
set this up,
bizarre.
even Elizabeth I said, even though I have the weak body of a woman, I have the heart and stomach of a lion, and a tutor at that, or whatever. Or sorry, yeah. So she was also playing up the idea of her father's legitimacy and acknowledging her feminine weakness, but aspiring to be him. So the English, in particular, have a long tradition of women in those leadership roles.
In defense of her,
Yes,
she
but
didn't know that there is not as much of a difference between men and women as we now know. And so taking her into account will sound backwards just because she didn't have the scientific knowledge that the three of us have. And saying
yes,
something
but
that
there's a
sounds
bizarre. There's a bizarre contradiction in British politics to do with women in power. That it is troubling for me as a progressive in Britain. The party, which is for those who don't know, is the centre left party here, or at least nominally the centre left party here in Britain, has always tried to have more women in power. And traditionally, when the Labour Party has done well, there have been more women in Parliament. That's always been the case. The Conservatives have always lagged behind in that way. But in terms of leadership, all prime ministers we've ever had have both been Conservative. And indeed, the Labour Party has never even had, even in opposition, a female leader, which is a bizarre contradiction considering the number of female MPs. It always seems really odd.
Yeah, it's the
that
same
that
here.
exists, and I don't know why that is particularly, but
I will, on behalf of those who know their Scottish politics, point out that Nicola Sturgeon is a leader she's First Minister. It was in the Scottish Parliament, and of course leader of the party. So you've got that in the devolved.
well, actually, all three of them, the first three major parties in the Scottish Parliament are all led by women, which is awesome. And you also have Leanne Wood, who's the head of the Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party. And when I say nationalist, don't get that mixed up, because Welsh and Scottish nationalism are actually on the left. Bizarrely, I know that's going to sound really strange to everyone else, but she's also a female leader of a major party here in Britain.
Yeah, and the DUP is led by a woman, I believe.
Yeah, but she's fucking foul. I mean, she's an awful human being. No offense, but
the Greens were led by Natalie Bennett, and now are co-led with Caroline Lucas and a guy whose name I forget. Sorry.
The Green, the Left, and the AFD all have the same system, which sounds weird to put those three parties together, but they do the thing where they have two people in charge, one guy and one woman.
That's weird.
Yeah,
I don't get the dual leadership.
There's actually a word for that in German. It's Doppelspitze or double top, duo top. I don't fucking
double
know why
top.
they do that.
That sounds like a gay thing. What's going on there? Double top. What? I don't get it.
Do you have a better translation, Kristi?
No,
P?
that's fine. Yeah, it's a representation thing. It's meant to ensure representation. Now, there's a lot of categories. You could argue there should be representation, but it's an attempt to make sure that there is equality in the decision making at the top.
That's fair enough. But it just seems odd that you would have two leaders, because they're not leaders, then, are they? Really? If there's two of them, I don't know.
The Green Party did it the last election. They presumably still do.
Yeah, and it didn't really go well for them.
Well, when does it go well for the Greens?
Yeah.
I think they had a rally, and that was one election cycle.
Yeah.
Last
so sorry,
election
to get
cycle,
onto-
it was actually a different man and a different woman for the Greens.
Okay, so they swapped.
Yeah, they swapped them out, but they still do the "we have a boy and a girl" thing.
So
Which
what were
is
your other questions?
oh yeah, getting back to the questions. I asked this. I should have put the ones out that we actually talked about. No. Oh yeah. Do you think that, or were there many conspiracy theories last time in Britain? I know that there were a lot of them in England. In America. What just happened there? In America, like the Pizzagate thing and the email thing. In Germany, right now, there's a lot of stuff going around with immigrants or refugees illegally voting for Merkel and the Antifa actually being funded by the CDU. Yeah, I actually heard someone
Well,
ask me that to my
it's at
face.
times like that. It's
that
at times like this when you hear these kinds of stories that you think, I'm not entirely sure satellite communication was a good idea, because it just allows idiots to talk shit with each other and dream up these crazy fucking ideas. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, somebody actually asked me about this, as in I would be an insider, because if that was a thing, I would probably be in on that because I would have been hired.
Exactly. Well, I keep saying, George Soros apparently owes me a lot of money because he's not been sending me the checks through. Maybe they're getting lost in the post. I don't know.
There was actually a point that I wanted to make earlier that we moved on from, but this is a good time to bring it up again, which is the American election. And I don't know if you have been following, probably not, because I'm pretty obsessed with this stuff. In the revelations from Facebook about spending during the campaign coming
the Russians,
out of a Russian troll farm. And what they are going to be presenting to Congress, and who knows how much more they're sitting on, is the fact that during the course of the election, there was this troll farm that bought ads in rubles, paid for them in rubles. And they basically, the purpose was to, well, they set up some events. It was all pro-Trump, anti-Hillary stuff. And they were targeting these in particular states. And it looks like, you know, they were going after specific groups. And for instance, I think they had a rally in Idaho that they put together from another country in order to rally people together in support of Trump. This is very concerning. And I think that this kind of stuff is going on. I think Putin sees democracy as a system, as a threat to his existence. If he can undermine our democracies by using our freedoms and our free societies against us, then he doesn't have to spend money fighting us. He doesn't have to spend money on weapons. He can just make his friends richer. Make himself richer too. And that's his real goal. So we have to realize that when we have these discussions internally, the extent to which these are being interfered with, and we have to demand that our governments crack down, put in restrictions, put in regulations on social media sites and other internet communications to ensure that foreign operatives cannot interfere with our elections.
Yeah,
that
well, essentially, yeah.
To a point I forgot about. You go first, Kevin. Mine is longer.
Well, I was just going to say, it seems that Facebook, unwittingly, it would appear, has been used as a hostile foreign propaganda agency.
I have a few points about propaganda, for a few questions rather. In what you said was we should crack down, which would be my first instinct as well. But the thing with cracking down is people will resent you. And I kind of fear that because in Germany, basically being a Nazi is banned. And like we can't draw swastikas or the Sieg rune when we aren't like explaining what a Nazi is. I kind of fear that this now resulted in being a Nazi being a cool rebellious thing. Now that the World War is so far behind us that being a Nazi is just a forbidden thing. That cracking down on all
I found
this
it very...
actually helped.
If I could clarify. So what, I guess I came from my very American context, and maybe those in the audience who are American understood what I was referring to. And for those in the international audience, I apologize for not being clear. In the United States, it's illegal to accept money from anyone living a foreign, and somebody who's not a citizen, in order to fund your campaign. That's already illegal. You can't take money from Chinese citizens. You can't take money from Russian citizens. If you want to give money to a campaign, it has to be from an American citizen. So when I donated money to Barack Obama, I had to include my passport number because I live abroad. They have regulations like that. So when I say crack down, that's the kind of thing I mean. Facebook was basically washing this money for Russia. And the fact that they didn't know it, well, now they do, right? So there has to be rules, for instance, about how politically related campaign ads or other stuff is funded on Facebook. And that has to come from a verified US account or something like that. You know, there has to be, or they have to put in their passport number. There has to be some kind of accountability the way we have already with cash to these, basically what we call them are in-kind donations. The Russians spend the money, but the people who reap the benefit of that spending is the Trump campaign. So they are saved money from that advertising that they can spend in other places. And that's how you regulate it. And that's how you crack down. So I don't want to crack down on what citizens can do. But what I want to make sure is that the people who are actually putting up the ads are citizens.
I just seen this while checking if there's any news.
Nice.
But
Sorry,
yeah,
can you talk again? Can you put up that picture again? Because I laughed, the screen went to me, so people didn't get to really fully
all right,
appreciate
yeah, here it is.
Nice.
This picture was posted to Reddit as the future of Germany.
This is what liberals, this is what conservatives want. This is the future conservatives want.
I'm sure it fucking isn't. Jesus Christ.
I'm not sure anyone wants an old Eastern woman with dreads.
Well, I think I just won the caption this picture contest.
Yes.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
But you have, I mean, for instance,
you
have son of an Indian immigrant is the Taoiseach in Ireland, so it's good to see that can happen. Well, you were going about the future Conservatives want, and the idea of a German chancellor with dreadlocks might seem slightly odd, but why not? It can happen. It's happened elsewhere. Maybe not dreadlock.
If we have a chancellor with dreadlocks, I would prefer that to be a black chancellor.
Well, yes.
For those of the people in the audience who can't read German, Reuven, could you go through the screen and just describe what the box is the notes on it, what it's talking about?
All right, sorry. So the thing which starts with the CDU having nearly 33% is just how many votes, how much percentage of the vote went to those parties. The Union, that is the CDU, and their Bavarian counterpart, because Bavaria always gets like their own little thing. They don't really like being Germans, they like being their own thing. That's the SPD, which we discussed, AfD, which we discussed in length, FDP, Libertarian Party, Die Linke, that's the left, Grüne, Green Party. Sonstige Parteien, those are all the other small parties, because there are like 30 little parties on the ballot. That includes the Pirate Party, which we have here as well as a party formed by the satire magazine Titanic called Die Partei, the Party, which actually is an acronym which stands for Party for Labor, Rule of Law, Animal Protection, Promotion of Elites, and Grassroots Democratic Initiative, which then is Die Partei, the party. Yes, they are actually ran, and I want to go into them for a second because let's have some lighter stuff. They want to make the German-Turkish comedian Serdar Somuncu, who had made fun of Hitler's Mein Kampf for years, reading it out in schools and openly laughing at it with children, their chancellor. And they want to make a member of the band Die Ärzte, the medical doctors, the minister for health. So
that's I like that.
and their foreign minister would be someone who is very hard to explain, called Helge Schneider, who is an abstract comedian and jazz musician who wants to be the foreign minister because he wants to spend some time abroad with his wife. This party actually has one seat in the EU Parliament.
So it says, if I'm reading my German, it says results of the state elections at the top. I'm working on my German, and then Stimmen is results.
Yeah, Stimmen is votes.
Oh, votes. Okay.
Hochrechnung would be the thing that comes in before the actual results comes in.
Exit poll.
Yeah, the exit poll. And Sitze, Hochrechnung is Sitze means seats. It's obviously a related word. How
I have to say,
they would have.
I don't want to be. I don't want to be rude, but the German language is really, really ugly. It's just awful.
It's not the
to the English
problem. It's not the worst problem with our language. The worst problem, the reason I love the English language is that you can speak gender neutrally, which is hard to impossible in German.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, everything is gendered or neutral.
Yeah.
There are 3 genders in German.
So what, like even sort of inanimate objects that aren't gendered at all?
Yes, for example, a table is male. A bed is neutral. And the door is female.
Yes, and a little girl is neutral. Das Mädchen.
You know why that is,
for fuck's
sake.
It's true. No, I don't. Oh, is it because it's Xian? So it's a
diminutive.
Yeah,
it's because it's Xian. The word is Maid, which is related to maiden. So Mädchen doesn't mean girl, it means little maiden. And that is why it's neutral, because it's a cutesy form. It just became the actual word over the years.
So when you put Qian at the end of a word, it just makes it a diminutive form of that thing. Like if you have, like a term of endearment is Pralinchen, my little chocolate bonbon.
Exactly.
And that would also be das. So that's the thing you can infer, like things that end with or height are feminine always. So Fahrenheit is die Fahrenheit.
So wasn't that named after a man?
Well,
what? This doesn't make any sense.
Or like receipt is Rechnung, and so because it's it's die Rechnung. So you can sometimes infer the gender of a word by how it's constructed.
Oh, well, this is ridiculous because you're now making English, which is a very complicated language, sound rational.
It's not. It's so easy. It's so easy compared to German.
There are 4 cases, so I have to learn like the masculine form of a definite article in the the nominative, the accusative, the dative, and the genitive.
Yeah.
So there are 4 different ways of saying the, depending on what you want the noun to do. That's why there's
Germany.
A phrase. Yeah,
Germany, you need to take a nice long shower and think about things, because this is wrong. Whatever you've done is gone badly wrong there. That's ridiculous.
There's a phrase, das Leben ist zu kurz, Deutsch zu lernen.
Yeah.
Life is too short to learn German.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, there's a lot of advantages to
German. Because that's why they do. The reason they do international air travel in English, at least, is because you can work out what to say without the fucking plane crashing before. Is it female? Is it male? There are 4 different fucking. Oh, the plane's crashed. It's ridiculous.
A plane could be male or neutral. You could say der Flieger, which would be male, or das Flugzeug, which would be neutral.
Yeah, I love how many things are Zeugs.
Yes,
Spielzeug,
Zoinks.
Spielzeug.
I mentioned the girl from around London who does the podcast with me. She loves weird German words, especially the really long words, and everything that ends in Zeug, which means stuff. For example, we call a plane Flugzeug, the fly stuff. We call tools Werkzeug, the work stuff.
It's true. And of course, I always have to bring up my favorite one, which is what you wear on your shoes or in your feet are Schuhe, and then what you wear on your hands are Handschuhe. Your little hand shoes. That's so
Hand
adorable.
shoes.
Yeah, not
Oh,
gloves. Isn't that adorable?
hand
And
shoes. You
one of my
fucking. Oh, Jesus Christ.
one of my favorite
That's
German words
ridiculous.
is and it's also very useful when you're learning German and there's a lot of things you don't know the word for is Dingsbums. Das
What?
Dingsbums. It means thingamajig in German.
It translates to thing boom.
That's genius.
So it can be fun. It can be.
It's a really fun language, and there are a lot of great artists who use this language because it's really fun to play around with.
Well, what I find too, it's very interesting now that my German is proficient enough to follow things like Guardians of the Galaxy, is the construction of a joke. Where the punchline will sometimes fall slightly differently depending on in what language you construct it. But sometimes it's exactly in the same point, no matter how you construct it. And I think Eddie Izzard, who does multilingual shows, also talks about how, it doesn't really matter how you construct a joke, the audience will always laugh sort of at the right point in the joke. And now being more bilingual myself, I can definitely see where he's coming from.
Kristi, let me stop you there. We should talk about this in a different hangout maybe, because I have a lot to say about this. And I kind of want to get back to the election makers.
Sorry.
And we should really do that someday. Just
I'm having too much fun.
Going off
Yeah,
about the German language because
let's get back to the election stuff.
yeah, exactly. I will ask Maddie to do that with you, and then the three of us without Kevin. Sorry, Kevin.
I can speak. No, I can barely speak English. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. but yeah, we should do some hangout about the German language sometime, maybe. I don't know. If you would be interested in that, let's make fun of the German language together.
Yeah, maybe we can convince Kevin German's not so awful after all.
No,
yeah,
it's awful.
We could
It's so bad.
I will spam you with German music now. I will spam you with German music now to convince you that if it's sung already, not if it's spoken.
Yeah, just send me some Rammstein or something. That'd be.
I'm actually not a fan.
Okay.
No, it's just a German band I'd heard of.
I was going to send you some Seed and Peter Fox, some Ärzte, some Wise Guys, and so on. But
so yeah, election.
Yeah, the election. We talked about all the parties. Oh, one thing I want to bring up. 4 years ago, it would have been possible to do the SPD, the left, and the Greens. But the SPD opted out of that and instead went for the Great or Big Coalition with the CDU, which meant for the last 4 years we had the smallest opposition ever, because the SPD didn't want to work with actual left-wingers. And now, because the SPD doesn't want to do the Great Coalition again, we have a really, really big opposition, but one that doesn't work because the AfD is in it. And no one can do anything when they are there. They will stop the opposition dead in its tracks.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It seems that they're going to be a roadblock to everything because no one's going to want to do deals with them.
I'm so glad that marriage equality passed before this, because that is one of the things that would be impossible now, I fear.
Are AfD against gay marriage then?
The AfD describe themselves as being pro-family, So.
Oh well, yeah. There you go. That's the thing. Whenever you hear, especially in America, but I think it probably seems to work in Germany too. Whenever you see family, like family values or something in the name of a thing, you think, well, these people are just bigots. You don't even really need to look into them. If the Family Research Council, yeah, homophobes, definitely.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's so weird because pro-family to me means being in favor of families, and a family doesn't have to be two parents of different sexes and genders and 3 kids. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
2 gay men adopting a refugee, that's a family. And if you are against that, you are not pro-family, you are a traditionalist. But that sounds bad, and so you call yourself pro-family.
Exactly. Well, exactly a bizarre thing when they're going about, say, gay adoption or whatever. You think, would you rather have the child just stuck in care until it's 18 and then kicked out onto the streets, or just would you rather them have a loving family that have 2 dads or 2 moms, or whatever combination? Who fucking cares? Like it's so backward.
And they are always coming with this gay panic of either they're going to be raped or they're going to be made gay.
Especially that seems especially profound in Germany, given that Bavaria has a lot of Catholics, do they not?
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of scandals going on right now with
Well,
church
exactly. Yeah.
boarding schools.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. Yeah, it's the world over. It seems the case that the Catholic Church are so family values that they fuck your children. I
But
mean,
hey,
it's ridiculous.
Kevin, rape culture doesn't exist. It's not real.
No, it doesn't exist. It's fine. It's fine. It's not like every country in the world has Catholic rape scandals that go on.
Just
You
because
know that somebody in the comments to this is going to say, well, those are the Catholics, I'm an atheist, so that is going to be someone's argument under this.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't really care who's doing the raping. If the raping is taking place,
I know, but you also know that somebody is gonna say this, right?
Well, I moderate
yeah,
my
exactly.
comments, so not under mine.
Good, well, again, to quote Richard Coughlin again in his recent hangout, he said, "If I ever go on a killing spree, I'm going to do it and scream that I'm doing it in the name of atheism and Pat Condell, just because I know it's going to create a massive shitstorm after the police shoot me dead." Which, yeah, I think there's something to that, definitely.
And I don't know if I made myself understood. Obviously, I don't have any ill will against atheists or Catholics or really anyone.
Yeah,
but
absolutely,
I just don't want people to blame the wrong thing. Please don't blame a religion.
Well, they will.
Blame rapists.
Trust me. I only speak English, so I know it's my first language, and I know I express myself perfectly well, but they will always misinterpret what you say, regardless.
Yeah.
So you can come out and say, I don't hate Catholics, but I don't like Catholic priests raping children, and they'll say, oh, you're a bigot, because they're idiots.
My family are predominantly Polish Catholics. I don't blame all Catholics for what what priest and higher ups and the way they covered up and moved people around to continue to prey on children rather than admitting and exposing the problem on their own. So I wouldn't tolerate that kind. It's the same maybe as like Islamophobia and saying all Muslims are bad because I disagree with these things in Islam.
Well, yeah, because my father's Irish, and I've got a lot of Irish relatives. I was even a Catholic altar server in my youth, believe it or not. Catholics, but I do hate Catholic priests who rape children. Robes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got to, not just that, but I got to wave around incense.
Ooh, little Kevin with his little beard.
No, I didn't. No. This was in my pre-beard days. This was in my baby face days. I must find it. I've got pictures. Hey.
Put a beard on him. Make it a meme and put a beard on him.
Well, that would be weird and possibly a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if I say Freudian necessarily, but there's some psychological issue.
In the corner as a kitten.
Oh God! Well, that would have been what 25 years before he was born. No, not that long ago.
It's not supposed to be realistic.
No, 20 years, maybe.
Well, if you're
Well,
gonna
exactly,
do,
yeah,
if you
but
have the pictures of you as Xena, then if you're gonna do it, be a bit inventive.
well, exactly, but we're talking about the Catholic Church here, and they wouldn't stand for such tall tales. Clearly, obviously.
Sorry, we've gotten you way off track again.
It's all right. I mean, the thing for me right now is because, unlike you two, I have to actually live with this for a while. I mean,
She
Kristi,
does.
you do too, but you're not
And
German.
she didn't even get to vote, did you?
Well, remember, I had the Trump bomb, right? So my shock level is, I'm really tough these days. And what
But
I'm
that's the
seeing
thing.
basically is
I'm
the
just
same.
so glad that you guys are taking some of the edge off right now.
No, because if you look at a lot of population attitude surveys, you're going to find between 10 and 15% of the population is a sort of right-wing populism. And you're going to get a sort of similar, you might have differences in distributions, but there is a core. It's like in Greece, we had the Golden Dawn, I think it was. You see elements of UKIP, but also the BNP and other right-wing parties in the UK, the EDL. You see the active neo-Nazis. They're not they identify, or they kind of lean, well, if they're going to vote for anyone, it's going to be a Republican. Let's just say that. But they don't have their own party to go to because of the first past the post system. So I think what you're just seeing is a political party that's capturing something that has probably always been there for a while. It just didn't have a way to stand out on its own. So maybe they would have hid in other parties. You're just shuffling people. People are sort of coming out. They're not sort of, it's not like because they have the opportunity, they're becoming that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But am I right, Kristi, in saying that you didn't get to vote in this?
No. I don't have German citizenship.
Yeah.
I'm going to be working
So
on my
that's, I mean, it's
residency.
even worse because she has to live with it, but she didn't even get to vote in it, which is
I have to pay my taxes to it, and boy, do I
exactly.
pay taxes. But I get services.
Well, I was looking on my Patreon, and I paid the German Exchequer 19 pence, no, 19 US cents in tax this year. So you're welcome, Germany.
Why? Did you order something here?
I don't know, but it's there. I've paid there's a tax breakdown per capita, or not per capita, per country, based on where the money's coming from, and I've paid the German Exchequer 19 cents, 19
Wow.
US cents. So,
Yeah, I guess it entitles you
and
to
you
a
know
free
what?
trip here now.
Yeah, you don't need to thank me. You don't need to send me a bouquet of flowers or anything. It's fine, honest.
But I think the question is, are there, so the Alternative for Deutschland will now have more state resources as a party.
Yeah.
They'll be able to, try to interfere with things. But do you feel that they're actually going to have a policy effect in terms of what's going to come out of whatever coalition is formed?
No, they are just gonna make the opposition useless. We have a really big opposition that will have no power whatsoever because one party in there will always vote against the other two. The SPD and the left can agree on a lot of things. They will never agree with anything together with the Alternative for Germany, which honestly now makes me want an alternative from Germany.
Right.
That's what you need to set up a party called the Alternative from the Alternative for Germany.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know why I don't see
presumably
this stuff more often.
Presumably the German translation for that would be about 19 words long and take half
No,
an hour
this
to
joke
say.
works wonderfully in German as well. I actually wrote this joke in German a while ago, and then I found out that it works just as well in English, and so I mentioned that it basically any conversation I had on the internet about German politics.
Right. So were there still questions?
No, I don't think so. I think we could hang the end out at the hangout slowly if you guys don't have any more questions.
No,
And
I think just it'll be interesting to see to what extent the AFD has longevity. To what
I
extent are they
think
actually going to be, sorry, but right now they've got an issue that's kind of hot, but in 5 years, I would be surprised if that's the hot issue that's kind of focused people's minds. Now, it might be, but that would, to me, seem to be a pretty good indicator of to what extent the party is going to have enough time to really settle in versus be a bit of a, what we'd say, flash in the pan.
Well, not just that, but
feel...
I was just going to say, a thing to take heart for the German people is that whenever these right-wing twats get into any position of power, they are so ineffective at actually doing anything, even if they have actual power to do something, that their movement loses all momentum and fizzles out. It always takes place because they don't know how. I mean, they're not being asked to govern as such, but they're part of the governing process, and they're so poor at it. And many of them often end up dropping out because of criminal convictions down the line because they're violent maniacs. That I can't see them being the force they are now in 5 years or 10 years.
I would hope that people would now see that they're ineffectual and don't vote for them again next time around.
I hope so too.
I hope that's the case with Trump too.
Yeah, well, that might be more about whether or not we can get people to stop interfering with our elections and going after voter rolls and voter suppression. But yeah, there's a...
And if you guys would actually develop a good system on how to vote, so that the person who the most people stood behind actually gets to be in office, that would be wonderful as well.
Yeah, that would like
also, this is all looking far too far into the future because we could be in a nuclear holocaust situation by then. So who knows? We could all be dead. Let's look at the positives.
And I think on that note, I'll end the hangout.
Yeah, that would be nice.
So yes, when I get links to Rory's channel, I'll go ahead and put them in the description box underneath. It'll probably be like a day or so. I'm pretty beat, guys, and
yeah,
so I won't
no
be doing
worries.
much
I will
left.
probably mirror this if I can figure out how to.
I can help you out with
your
that.
channel.
And
But why is it
Kevin,
going to take that long?
Because
it's Sunday in Germany, nothing's open, so you clearly can't be going anywhere to do something. You're just being lazy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I get like that at 9:45.
I have to cook dinner.
Yeah, that's it.
And
right. So thank you, Kevin, also for joining.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank both of you for doing this with me.
Yes, of course. All right, guys, I've been Kristi. You've been awesome. And all that's left to be said now is for me to say goodbye and to have my guests say goodbye. So guests, say goodbye.
Bye.
Good night.